So we are live, and welcome to the first in a series of discussions about Europe's blue economy, the use of its seas, and the economic opportunities and challenges this presents. I'm Chris Davis, a long-standing former member of the European Parliament's Environment Committee, and these days a senior advisor to Ruud Pedersen Public Affairs in Brussels. Our timing could hardly be better, for just yesterday, the European Commission adopted a communication on how it intends to shape the blue economy in a sustainable way. And this provides the framework for specific proposals that we'll see being brought forward over the months to come. I look forward to exploring some of these issues with my guests in the next hour or so, but this webinar is taking place thanks to the sponsorship of the International Association of Oil and Gas Producers. So let me first invite its European Affairs Director, François-Régis Mouton, to say a few words by way of introduction. Over to you, Francois.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thanks for moderating that event. Good morning, everyone. Indeed, I'm François-Régis Mouton, Regional Director Europe for the International Association of Oil and Gas Producers. I'm very happy to welcome you all to what is now our third event series in collaboration with Ruud Pedersen Public Affairs, once again on a hot topic in Brussels, as you said, the sustainable blue economy. As I'm sure all of you know, the Commission strategy was released indeed yesterday, and I'm very happy this discussion takes place immediately the day after. Just like the rest of society, users of this marine environment face multiple challenges. First one is to reduce GHG emissions. Second, reducing air pollutants, and you know how much there are in ports. Third, keeping the world economy going, and finally, keeping businesses across the marine value chain afloat. European leaders have to do all this in parallel, and as a strategy suggests, it is no longer enough to talk about blue growth. The growth needs to be also sustainable. It is our job as industry to provide a combination of solutions that tick all the boxes and more tailored solutions and measures to tackle individual challenges. Some solutions and measures will be transitional, others will be long-term. Both are needed to make progress as soon as possible. The oil and gas industry is a major player in this blue economy. In Europe, for instance, nearly all oil and gas production takes place offshore. Oil and gas cargoes travel the world on a daily basis alongside thousands of other ships carrying goods and people across oceans. One of the market-ready and affordable solutions to do all this is LNG, liquefied natural gas, as it ticks all the boxes, achieves immediate emission reduction, and it is cost-effective. LNG GHG intensity can also be reduced over the long term and LNG being decarbonized. It's a solution the oil and gas industry already supplies, and that will continue to grow globally. It is not enough on its own, of course, but it's a big leap forward already. For our first discussion, we choose to focus on coastal economies. We have a great lineup of institutional and industry speakers from DG Mare, Costa Cruises, and the European Seaports organization. On behalf of IOGP, I want to thank you all for your time today, and I really look forward to hearing your views. And Chris, I hand over to you with Bernard and to Isabel.
Thank you, François-Régis, and you've heard the word from our sponsor. Thank you very much, IOGP. Well, my guests today are indeed Isabel Reboost, Secretary General of the European Seaports Association, which represents just about every port in Europe. And I see from the website, Isabel, that's sort of you suggest nearly 500 ports, but obviously we think of the really big ones in particular. And then Bernard Van Hul, Director of European Affairs with the Costa Group, which in normal times welcomes millions of vacation seekers to its fleet of cruise ships. I take it there haven't been many emissions from those cruise ships over the past 12 months, but no doubt they'll be back in operation en masse before very long. And Isabel Violon from the European Commission. Isabel, let me turn to you first, because you've been working on this communication for a good while. Why does Europe need a sustainable blue economy strategy? What are we doing wrong? What's wrong at present?
Well, thank you, Davis. Chris, I mean, there are a couple of reasons why there is this communication that has been adopted yesterday, in fact, and published yesterday. If I start with, I would say that if we want to be realistic and credible, if we want to achieve the European Green Deal objective, I mean, we won't be able to do it without the ocean. I mean, we can't ignore them. While most of our politicians or administrations very often they focus on the land, they forget that we have these immense seas around us. I think that it's very important to put the oceans on the table if we want to achieve our objective. Just to give some figures, for example, I mean, 80% of all the life forms are in the oceans. So if we want to be realistic about preserving the biodiversity, we can't ignore that. If we want to decrease carbon emission in the transport sector, we can't skip the shipping sector, because 80% of the goods that are traded around the world, they are carried by sea. So there are plenty of examples like that show that, I mean, if we want to implement and change the way we are organizing our economy, we can't ignore the oceans. So that's one. The second aspect, the second reason I would say is that also, if we want to be realistic, our ambition of recovery in Europe, we can also ignore the sea, because 40% of the population of the EU lives on coastal areas. So I mean, they are there. I mean, living in the coastal areas. If we want to look at the recovery of those areas, we have also to look at the environment around them and the seas. So that's another reason. Then there are also very more fundamental reasons that are linked to the fact that we can't continue multiplying activities at sea as we have done in the past centuries and decades, because we see that it has implications on the ecosystem. It has also implications in terms of conflict with the different activities. So it's not possible to continue to manage in silos, fisheries on one side, transport on the other end, and so on, without considering that there are interactions. I mean, the seas, it's not that there is private property. I mean, all the activities, they are happening in the same space. So at some point, we have to stop looking at each of the activity in a narrow focus, but to have a coherent approach on what we want to do at sea. So that's another very important reason to look for a coherent approach. And why we need a EU strategy, because I mean, the problems, they don't stop at the border, neither nor the problems. So I mean, at some point, we are sharing the same sea basin, the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Med, and we need also to have this discussion between the different EU countries to agree on what we want to do in our sea and how we coordinate our approaches. It's about activities at sea, but it's also important, for example, when you look at maritime security, we won't be able to solve the issues of maritime security if we don't join forces. So that's another reason for having something at EU level. And that will be the last point. I think that when we look, and we will go into more details, when we try to transition to a more sustainable blue economy, we know that for many sectors, this will necessitate a number of important investments. Investment in innovation, in research, in data, in digitalization, and things like that. And we know that if we don't join forces, if we don't mobilize all the energies around a common vision, we won't be able to meet the challenges. So I don't know, it's not exhaustive list, but I think I gave you at least a few arguments for having this new communication and sustainable blue economy.
Can I just ask an institutional question? I mean, your DG Mare, I think, I tend to think as that as the fisheries department, and yet so much of this blue economy is actually about industrial activities, about job creation. It's about major structures in the seas, be they oil rigs or pipelines or wind turbines, and I mean, presumably DG Grow and energy commissioners and the like are very much involved with the strategy.
They have been involved. I mean, this communication, in fact, DG Mare just played a role of the coordinator and the pen. But of course, this has been a very important collective work. And that's what was great in a way, because for the first time, we have a communication that is not from DG Mare. It's a commission communication that was discussed at the college in oral procedure all the cabinets around the table and the different commissioners. And that's why, I mean, this made my life very difficult over the last few months, I can tell you. But that was great. I mean, to see and to discuss with all the different services how we can coordinate our policies around a shared vision. How can we mobilize different tools we have, both in terms, for example, of research, of, for example, all the satellite aspects that are managed by DGDP, and many aspects. I mean, and what was great with this initiative is that we really set up an inter-service group with all the DGs present, and that worked very well in a way. So that's also another very important message from the communication, is that we have to work together. So it applies to the Commission services, but it should apply also to the different ministries, the different member states, but it should apply also to stakeholders, that at some point we need to discuss and talk to each other and try to agree on what's the vision, what the direction we want to go, and how we will go there. In a way, we try to do our job at Commission level, but of course we hope the others will join in this collective effort.
Thank you. Isabel Reboost, from the port side, I mean, presumably the ports were consulted, and you know, you fed in your views about you wanted from this. And we all know, I mean, the ports, of course, are, you know, major centres of employment, but also we read increasingly that shipping is one of the greatest causes of air pollution, and you know, there's all sorts of issues to be addressed. So, what was on your wish list? What did you most want to see from the strategy, and from what you've seen so far, is it going down the right way?
Yes, thank you, Chris. Yes, I think we very much welcome this new strategy. As a principle, I think we think as ports it's very good to develop a strategy, given the complexity as well, because blue economy is a very wide concept. Many sectors are involved. It's sometimes also a first challenge is to define the sector, because if we talk about the land-based sectors, to what extent it's not all the sectors in the port, you could say the chemical plants and so on. Are these also parts of blue economy? I don't think so. So there we a kind of limitation or saying what is blue economy is already probably an important aspect, but that it has to become sustainable. This is important, but what I think is very important is to also acknowledge that many blue economy sectors are by definition a contribution to sustainability, be it the offshore renewables and so on. So circular, maritime circular economy and so on. So that it's not only we should reduce externalities, but that we also define where are the solutions, or how can blue economy by definition help reaching the Green Deal. So that I think it's very important. And then recognize, of course, the role, and that is what we asked, the role of ports as hubs and landing points for all or most of the sectors of the blue economy, which brings us in a quite unique position, because you cannot bring on land the added value of the sea. You always need a port. So, I mean, this is a bit our incontournable, our aspect. We cannot be replaced in that.
Well, can I just ask Isabel? I mean, I think of ports traditionally as huge employers of labour, but of course, from the 60s onwards with containerisation, that must have been dramatically reduced. I mean, how important are they economically?
I think, I mean, it's very difficult to put figures on it, because you speak about direct employment and indirect employment. And I think that what you have to understand is that having this port in the area, certainly when we look at blue economy, that you have a lot of indirect employment. Looking, for instance, at the sector of Bernard, the cruise industry has a lot of employment for the region, for in surrounding sectors. Certainly, if the ship is in a turnaround port at the beginning of a cruise voyage, this gives a lot of added value for the city, cleaning services and so on, supply. But Bernard can explain that better. So there is a lot of but it's different jobs than before. Before, I mean, the classical port job was, except for the Port Authority, where you have, of course, the managers and so on, but you would look at the blue collars, the big blokes have loading and unloading the ships, the physical work. And now even this physical work is done by very specialized machines and engines and tugs that you have to manage. So
I take it it's women working these machines, not big blokes these days, is it?
Yeah, both of them. It's still a bit big blokes, but it's changing, and I think that the port is now open for very different profiles, which is quite interesting because most of European ports are urban ports, so very near to big cities with a lot of diversity, a lot also of people in innovative jobs, youngsters in wanting to be in startups and so on. And this then comes together with the whole research innovation part of Blue Economy. So I think they can really feed each other. So that is also an interesting aspect, I think.
But the numbers, COVID aside, the numbers for the people going on cruise ships now they were just climbing. And obviously, as Isabel touches, the direct jobs and there's the indirect jobs, and there must be a huge number of jobs supported by the cruise industry. But how can it ever be sustainable? You look at these enormous ships out there, and you just think, that has got to be an environmentalist's nightmare, hasn't it?
Maybe, but I think Bernard can add to that. I think the sustainability of cruise is an important aspect, but we have to see it as a sustainability of tourism. For me, this is the whole complexity, because I mean, there is a lot of increasing tourism. We all fly, we all want to go on weekends, and young people 2 days off and they go somewhere. We didn't have that before. And this is an acceptance. Either we accept that or not, or we put limits to that. But so if we talk about sustainable cruise, we also have to talk about sustainable tourism and see if there are limits to that. Do we put, is it okay that certain cities will say we do not want more than so many tourists, or we close at some point? Right. And then I think you have to talk about all the tourism sectors at once, because if I understand well, cruise is only a few percentages of the tourism in big cities like Barcelona or.
But they make a big difference. Sustainable tourism.
Sustainable.
I'll hand over to Bernard, Isabel. Can you make cruise ships sustainable?
Okay. First, and I would like to thank you, the organizers, for organizing the event, especially today, the day after the publication of the Blue Economy communication from the Commission, and also considering to invite Costa. I would like to stress two elements, Chris. The first one is about the geography of Europe. Europe is surrounded by the sea. It's often something which is forgotten, and I would like to jump on what Isabel Vialon has mentioned. Policy is often land-based driven, and the maritime and peripheral region of EU is often forgotten. So there is a significant part of the answers that may come from the sea, and this is a good opportunity we have with the new communication from the Commission. So answering to your question about sustainability, and I will speak for Costa Group, of course, I cannot speak for others, but Costa Group, we have integrated the UN SDGs as day one, so in 2016. So in every operations of our ship, we try to identify the individual UN SDGs and develop new projects to create best practices, and it addresses energy, it addresses waste, it addresses tourism, because we have two dimensions, shipping and tourism, and this is always done in partnership with local communities. I guess one element I would like to share with people and the audience is that everything we develop on board of vessels in terms of new approaches, we can never develop them without partnership with port of destination and local communities. So it's a genuine link between what is happening on board the vessels and in the different destinations.
Yeah. Come on, but at the end of the day,
you want country.
How do you curb your air pollution? How do you make sure your waste is dealt with properly? How all these issues? To what extent do you feel, Costa, to give you as an example, are you taking a leading role, or are you being dragged along by legislation?
So, very good question, and thank you for raising it. So, interestingly, the GRC, the research body of the European Commission, has released very recently, a few weeks ago, a study about innovation in the shipping industry and about decarbonization efforts. And came out of the report that the cruise industry is really a pioneer in terms of developing new technologies and innovating for new technologies. Regarding Costa Group, in terms of emissions, we have been the first cruise ship globally to have ordered LNG vessels, and our new vessels are LNG driven, and LNG contributes significantly to
LNG is liquefied natural gas.
Yeah, natural gas liquid, indeed. Contributes significantly to the mitigation of SOx emissions, NOx emissions, small particles, 100% reduction almost. And for CO2 reduction, it doesn't fix it completely, but it helps to reduce by 20%. And I would like to stress one element. We are speaking about decarbonization. There is today no fit-for-all solution. At the same time, we have all an obligation, a duty to contribute. And everything we can do today, we should do it today. Because otherwise, it will just be accumulating CO2 emissions year by year. And at the end, the total equation to decarbonize will be too difficult. And it's already a challenge today. So LNG is, in our eyes, already part of the solution. We are also investing in batteries, in fuel cells, in methanol projects, and we even have a zero emission ship concept ready, and we are looking to the European Commission for EU funding to make it a real European story. I hope I have answered your question, Chris.
Just before we touch on and bringing on all the emission issues, let me touch upon the classic one, which is, here you are, the floating town, and not just you. I mean, all the other cruise ships. What happens to your effluent, the human effluent? I mean, does that always do all? I mean, I think modern ships probably capture it, and I'll bring in Isabel. I mean, take it you have to have ports authorities which can pump out this stuff in large quantities. But is that happening all the time, or are there still big cruise ships just discharging into the oceans? And maybe that's not a bad thing, because the oceans are very big and it's a natural substance.
So you raised a question to me?
Yeah. I mean, to what extent is human effluent now captured in all cases?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we have incorporated the UN SDGs as their one, and it driven our practices and our approaches. And we have one fascinating project today, which is running, which is called Clean Project. And basically, the Clean Project is about two things: reducing significantly the organic waste, what you are talking about, okay, and for the residues, to turn these residues of organic waste into biogas. So you would make from waste a new energy product, and why not a biogas? This is still a project. We are working on it.
Okay.
With the German Institute for Seaports, and also with German funding. But we are really looking to different avenues, and this is one of them.
But okay, so some very interesting work going on, some very research work and development work, but it's not standard practice at the moment, I take it. I mean, it's, these things are not there yet.
Yeah, it's not standard practice. We look to the future, okay. And we look to technical feasibility. So today we are already, you mentioned it to some extent. You provided some element of the answer. Our vessels are floating smart cities. So you have three words: floating, smart, and city. floating, everybody knows what it is. Smart, it's about digitalization. So we have developed and we are using significant digital technology to mitigate the different ways, being energy, being sewage, being others. And cities, it tells what it is. We are like real cities, and we have treatment plants to treat sewages, and they are treated. And also for, how do you call it, bilge water. It's a little bit technical.
Yeah.
But we reduce the quantity of water in it, and we absorb the water of bilge water to make it, as we call it, technical water, to be used to cool down engines and not to have another form of disposal.
Okay. Isabel Vialon, I must come to you on that. Just on shipping generally, and then we're talking about cruise ships here, but obviously the vast majority of ships out there are merchant vessels, huge container ships and the like. Am I wrong? But by and large, we at a European level, we haven't really put huge pressure on the shipping industry yet, have we? I mean, we've left it to the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, to sort of set standards, but we haven't. In many cases, the shipping seems to have not been subjected to the same controls, for example, as land-based industry.
Well, I think we are working at the two levels, at the international level and EU level. But indeed, as it's a very globalized sector, I mean, a lot of efforts have been put in IMO to change the rules at the global level to create a level playing field. But it doesn't mean that we should wait IMO to change things. So we have also to work at the EU level. So that's the strategy of the Commission. And that's why, for example, with the new communication on smart mobility, there is a number of actions that have been proposed by the Commission to address all modes of transport, including the maritime sector. So the idea is that we should reduce also carbon emission from those sectors, and with the objective also of putting the first zero emission vessels on the market by 2030. So we need to create the incentives, because we know very well that if we are waiting, we are asking the shipping industry, they will say, oh, the technology is not ready. But if you ask the shipbuilders, they will say, we are ready to create those vessels, but we need the demand. So we have to stimulate the demand and create an incentive for this type of new vessels. So that's the whole purpose of the different actions that we want to put on the table. One of them being the extension of the ETS regulation. But there are many also there are many other legislation that will be modified in the coming months, also to address the alternative fuels, to help the ports to adapt to those transformations, because this has also implications for many ports. So I mean, it's not that everything will happen in one day, but we have to build the way to that direction, and to create a real incentive for all the stakeholders to invest in research, in innovation, in solutions, because the solution exists. But of course, if for example, the shipping sector can continue using heavy fuel oil, they will continue it very cheap, and the impacts on the environment, the carbon emission, okay, but it's clearly the cheapest way to run a vessel for the moment. So unless there are incentives to change, either because you limit the emissions in certain areas and the control emission areas, for example, as we did for the Baltic, otherwise nothing will happen. But when you put new rules, then stakeholders find solutions. I mean, the example of the Baltic is a perfect example. They adapted the fleet ports, they adapted to the ECA zone that was set up in the Baltic, and for the benefit of the citizens living in the coastal areas and in the ports. So I think we are to as public decision makers to see how we can influence this movement.
Okay, well, indeed. And Isabel Reboost, I mean, I take it. If you look at Europe's ports and the pollution from them, there must be national or municipal air control regulations which are bearing down upon the industry, and they'll vary from one area to another. But we've heard, for example, that liquid natural gas, LNG, can reduce sulfur emissions and nitrogen oxide emissions. but that's on a very small scale at the moment. Do you as the Ports Association, do you feel the pressure to reduce the toxic emissions from the ships? Is there a lot of pressure on that?
Yes, I think it's what I always say is a port, in fact, is with one leg in the sea, in a very globalized world with the shipping sector, but with one leg in a very local environment, with very close to the city, with a strong community around it, with people who really have this awareness and, you know, do want to have this fresh air. And we completely agree with that. So with there, we really have been pushing for the last years a bit the shipping sector in going green. And it's true that the shipping sector has been regulated at a late stage. I mean, the first IMO 2018 was the first time that a clear goal has been set to reduce emissions. Now we have the Green Deal and so on. And I think these goals are very important, to set a goal. And then the importance is that then to recognize that there maybe are different solutions. And as Bernard is saying, LNG, it's maybe not perfect. We are not reducing all the emissions. On CO2, it's only an limited effect. But let's use it when it's there, and let's already gradually and use it as a transitional role. We may not forget that it has been very much pushed as well by European policy, very, very much. So our ports are also, if they have to make the investments to facilitate alternative fuels, these decisions are not made overnight. I mean, this has to be planning, financing, getting authorizations and so on. And so now that these projects are running, we see that at policy level, sometimes everyone said, but LNG, but that's the past. But this is very frustrating for a port to see you go all the way, you are maybe one of the front runners, and then to see that policy is changing gear. Of course, there are new realities, new technologies, but that's why we believe that for the decisions to be made now on how to green and so on, there should be also a kind of dialogue and recognition of which solutions are there, and some solutions can exist next to each other or for different segments.
Well, when you're talking about solutions, moving on from toxic air pollution to CO2 emissions, I mean, where are the solutions? I know we can have electric ferries in the Baltic, relatively small, short distances and the like. But I mean, and I know some big shipping companies like Maersk has said it's trying to achieve zero emission vessels. But as I understand it, the technology is really not there for big merchant ships, or indeed for cruise ships. Bernard, come on to you. I mean, where are we on shipping technology? Zero emission shipping. Is it on the horizon?
Thank you. It's really a fascinating topic, and I guess everybody recognize that there is no one fit-for-all solution. That's one. Isabel from ESPO mentioned also that there might be different solutions, and personally, I truly believe in the accumulation of different technology, so no one single technology to address the complete picture. And another dimension is the magnitude of the challenge and the magnitude of the absence of magnitude of the means allocated to address the challenge. And I will explain it. The Commission has released an excellent analysis of the Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Directive, which is one of the pillars to develop new supply and new infrastructure to address alternative fuel for the different mode of transport. And what comes out of the report is, beside the fact that shipping is recognized as one of the sectors which is the most challenged to decarbonize in terms of means, waterborne transport, shipping, receive less than 5% of member states' total budget dedicated for alternative fuel infrastructure for all mode of transport. Less than 5%. Gentlemen, ladies, if we want to be realistic, we need to put means proportional to the challenge. And this message is true for member states, but it's true also for the EU institutions, for all partners around the table. And I would like to seize the opportunity, Chris, as you used to be the rapporteur on ETS, to make a link with ETS, because this will be part of the debate as from July. Extending ETS to shipping might make sense.
And I'm
if
sure
the revenues from shipping is not reinvested in shipping, and we don't have proportionate means to support decarbonization, the challenge will be even bigger.
Okay, I should just say to those who are watching, we're about halfway through now, that you're listening here to a debate sponsored by the International Association of Oil and Gas Producers on the blue economy. The communication was produced by the Commission yesterday. I know Isabel Vialon, one of our guests here today, was very instrumental in pulling that document together. You've also got Isabel Reboost, the Secretary General of the European Seaports Association, and Bernard Van Hull of the Costa Group cruise liners. So, Isabel Vialon, the technology, and sure, how do we reduce emissions from shipping? We can put pressure on the ship owners, of course, by including shipping within the emissions trading system. We could. You've just heard a plea for more money, really, coming from Costa. Hand out more money to the shipping industry to help us develop new ways. But at the moment, we really don't have the technology to meet zero emissions on a huge scale, do we?
Well, I think there are. I mean, here again, what I mentioned before is that you have different sounds depending to who you talk to. But I think that for many ship builder, I mean, they are ready to invest and find new solutions. I mean, both in terms of engines and different systems. So I think if there is a demand, if there is a clear message from the legislature that we need to have this type of vessel available in 10 years' time and after, because the legislation will be such that the traditional vessels won't be able to operate anymore in the EU, then I think I'm pretty sure that there will be solutions that will be put in place. So that's the first thing. And then also, I mean, clearly to reply to what was said by the previous speakers, I mean, we are not only preaching in the air. I mean, there are plenty of EU funds that will be invested in research and innovation. There is also the specific funds dedicated to transport. I mean, the CET and the motorways of the sea and all this. I mean, they will integrate in their new priorities for the coming years all those transformations that will take place in the sector. That's not that we are only taking decisions, I mean, paper legislation, but I mean, we will accompany this transition. But I think what I would like to mention now is that also we should make use of the recovery that is now in preparation, and that the member states are asked to prepare their recovery and resilience plans at national level, explaining how they will use the recovery funds to support the recovery in their countries. And clearly, there is a huge expectation from the Commission that type of funds will be invested in infrastructure that support the transition to sustainability in general, but including in the sustainability of the blue economy. So a number of member states already have expressed willingness to use this opportunity to support blue economy, and that's for us a very good signal. I mean, you know that the Council is also working at the moment on concrete conclusions on blue economy. So just after the communication from the Commission, there will be also Council conclusions and a ministerial meeting organized by the Portuguese presidency in June to discuss all those aspects. And I think this is quite promising because, I mean, for us, it's also very important that all those aspects are taken into account in the programming of the recovery funds on top of the EU traditional structure of funds. So there is a window of opportunity at the moment, and that's very important for us to have this communication table now, so that it can also be taken into account for this type of decisions.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me turn to Isabel Reboost and just looking at the Commission's document, and of course this is just a communication, and there's lots of detail to come, lots of specific proposals. Amongst those specific proposals, what are you looking for as a port association? What help do you want from Europe to help drive forward both the economy of the ports, job creation, and the sustainability of the ports?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for this question. I think let me then start with where we ended on the funding, and it's maybe stupid always to ask money, but I think because
most people do.
But it's true that if we look at for instance, the funding over the last years, EU funding on TEN-T and CEF, there we had only 4% was going to ports, whereas ports we are now just finalizing a study. Ports are beyond their traditional roles, having a lot of new roles and a new public roles. We have seen it. We see it with sustainability, with facilitating blue economy and sustainable blue economy, but we see it as well with resilience of supply chain, what we have seen in COVID and so on. So there are new roles with more responsibilities, public responsibilities. If we talk about the greening of shipping, what the ports have to do, invest in infrastructure to facilitate it, whereas they are not the polluter. I mean, because it's the shipping line which is in principle the polluter. So there, we believe that, for instance, if we talk about ETS, you need a part of that money going back as well to the ports who make the investments, because these are investments with no return on investment. So that is one thing. The other thing, and that is, I think, very well present in the strategy, is the cooperation, the need for cooperation and dialogue between the different sectors. Because what we see is that it's getting crowded in front of the coast. I mean, we have a lot of activities going on with all different stakeholders. We have pipelines going on the seabeds that are maybe crossing access lanes, maritime access lanes to the port. So there is a lot of in the planning and so on, a lot of dialogue needed. So that, I think, are important things. And what I finally believe is important is that if we talk about greening, Green Deal and so on, that we have to understand, or the policymakers should understand, that, for instance, to allow and develop and enhance blue economy and sustainable blue economy, you will need to invest also in basic infrastructure in the ports. Let me just give a concrete example. If you are the facilitator of the offshore wind energy industry, then you have to bring these blades from the hinterland, and they are coming often by barges and so on, have to be transshipped and so on, maybe go on the roads. The access roads to the ports have to, because it's very extraordinary transport, let's say. So you need to adapt your quay. So this is basic infrastructure. And in your introduction, Chris, you were talking about, the big ports and so on. But if blue economy is maybe specifically something not of the big ports, it is a very interesting niche for smaller ports, even sometimes ports in less populated area or more remote areas, like in the north of Holland or of the Netherlands. So this is also the interesting fact that you have it there. So it can be a job creator and enhancing, bringing new activity in the region. So therefore, it's very important to boost it a bit and to make it also new centers of excellence, of new ideas and so on. So that, I think, is a bit the main ideas we would like to convey in this strategy, and a lot is already there.
Well, Isabel Violon, you can, I'm sure, building on that, you can tell your colleagues in DG Climate, DG Clim, that remind them that the emissions trading system price has gone up to about 56 euros now per ton of carbon allowances. And so there's much more money available. So they can afford to distribute some to the ports and probably also to the cruise liners to develop new technology. Is that the case, Bernard? You've got your hand out too, I suspect. What else would you want from the blue economy package?
Again, good question, Chris. If the question is about what we could ask based on the blue economy communication, one one element that draw my attention, and there are many actually in this document, is the fact that it takes into consideration the sustainable and smart mobility strategy of the Commission. So, and to jump on what Mrs. Vialon said regarding the recovery fund, I can only concur. There is an opportunity also for member states to size. Isabel from ESPO mentioned infrastructure. I can only concur on that, and I can share one or two elements, concrete example. Shore power, to supply vessels when vessels are alongside the quay, to use energy coming from power, from renewable energy, would help significantly to mitigate and to address completely CO2, but also other air quality issues when vessels are at quay. And recovery funds could offer a nice pipeline or a nice portfolio to address this issue. We have just inaugurated last week in Germany the biggest shore power plant in Europe with one of our IDA vessels. We need to realize that in Europe today, and I speak for Costa Group again, and only 50% of our vessels are equipped with plug-in devices to use shore power. But in Europe, the number of ports, and I'm not addressing specifically port, but local entities, which have enough power capacity to address our vessels, is a handsome. And there is even no single in the Mediterranean basin.
Okay, can I just build on that? I mean, Isabel Reboost, I mean, do you need legislation from the Commission to force ports to do this? Or, I mean, why aren't they doing it already? The demand is there.
I just want to say they are doing it, and I mean steps are being made, and I think Costa is an example maybe in having the availability on board of their ships of this onshore power supply. But we know that a lot of ports are going in that direction. But installing onshore power supply is an extremely costly investment. It takes a lot of time. You have to connect it to the grid. In many cases, the grid is not renewable. So you are just moving emissions from the quayside to the hinterland. In fact, you're doing a costly investment for 5% of the total of ship emissions, because being at berth, it's only 5%. For cruise, it's maybe more because you are longer at berth. So it depends on segment. We are very much in favor, and we are if we see this onshore power supply certainly as an important part of the solution, but we call for an intelligent approach, because having a theoretic approach where all the quays have to have onshore power supply, it will be a lot of stranded assets and with no added value. What I wanted to make, if I may, a remark about the recovery fund. I think it's very interesting, and we were very hopeful, or are still very hopeful, that some of this money will go to the ports as engines of growth and recovery, and what is happening there, and also the whole greening part. But what we have seen in the plans of the member states so far, or what we hear, is that there is only a very limited attention to this. That is one point. The other point is that the money that has been distributed to each member state is very unequal. If you compare, for instance, France, Spain, and Italy, which are, let us say, a bit in size similar maritime countries, Italy, and I'm not against it, I mean, they have been touched very heavily by the corona crisis, but they have an envelope that is twice as big as Spain and France. So, I mean, if we then see to the investments that have to be supported, this will certainly have an effect on investments. So there will be an unequal level playing field, let's say, between these countries. So these are, and then you have important maritime countries, other ones who do not have a big envelope from recovery. So this is a bit what we see, and we hope that in the assessment of the recovery plans, the Commission is maybe speaking to some of the member states and having a serious word with them on the needs, and maybe on also strengthening this maritime pillar and the greening of it.
One last question. I know we've been concentrating, Isabel, on the aspect of the communication on the blue economy dealing with ports and shipping and such like. But one last round on that. Just how do Europe's ports, when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to ensuring waste recycling, when it comes to provision of renewable electricity and you know, these key factors, how do we compare with ports elsewhere around the world? I mean, maybe to start with you, Bernard. I mean, okay. I mean, I know you operate mainly around Europe in any case, but your group as a whole operates. Carnival Group operates beyond that.
Okay. Thanks for the question again, Chris. For Costa Group, I would like to highlight that the European dimension is very high, and I will explain. So all of vessels are flying the European flag. All of vessels are built in Europe, and I stress it to the colleague, the representative of DG Mare. All of vessels are built in Europe, Finland, Germany, in Italy. So European yards are really our partner. All of vessels are managed from out Europe. And to answer your question, Chris, because also of the tourism dimension of Costa Group, in comparison with other shipping segments, Europe is a key destination. So with my competence, all I can see is that we are investing significantly in Europe, because this is also the place where we go. And it's difficult for me to give you an answer for beyond Europe, because it's simply beyond my own portfolio. But that's what I would like to stress, or to conclude on this specific point. We have an opportunity in Europe. We need to size it, but we need to be realistic as well. And I guess the example, the details Isabel from ESPO highlighted regarding shore power, stress it sufficiently that there might be nice ideas on paper, but to turn them into reality is sometimes a challenge. It needs time, and it needs everybody around the table, everybody.
And Isabel Reboost, how do European ports compare to ports around the world when it comes to sustainability issues?
Yeah, Chris, what do you want me to say? They are the best, but no, but seriously, I think what we are making every year an environmental report of our ports, and this is based on data that we receive from all our a network of Ecoports network. So it's more than 120 ports that are giving their data each year. And so there we see on the different parameters that ports are really progressing on them. And this is normal, because ports, you know, maybe I can tell you that ESPO has been set up in 1993 as a federation or organization of all European ports. And the first document they agreed on was a green guide. So in 1994 already. So that was the first initiative that linked European ports. And ever since, environment has always, within our organization, been very important, because, and this has to do with the governance of European ports. European ports are hybrids. They have a commercial side, but they have also a public side. And this means that they are not just going for the money, let's say, or maximizing profit, but they are also very much mission driven. And as I said in the beginning, they are also most of the time very urban ports. So they have to have this license to operate and license to grow. So they pay a lot of attention. They all have already for years or decades now environmental managers, plans, sustainability reports, and so on. So they cannot go, and of course they are very much pushed as well by the European legislation later, but they go beyond that. We are now finishing a new green guide with really very strong ambitions for European ports to reach at. And this guide is made for ports, but is also made by ports. So our membership is supporting this guide, and this guide will come out in the next weeks. So I think it's not easy, but they know and they want it, and they know there is no other way to grow. So,
so it'll be bedtime reading for European commissioners. Okay, and before we finish, Isabel Violon, I know we've been talking about shipping and ports, but I'm a former chairman of the European Parliament's Fisheries Committee, so I read the communication and I just looked at one particular sentence where it said there was going to be an action plan produced to promote biodiversity, and there would be specific mention, effectively, of controls on bottom contact fishing. Now that means trawling, really, bottom trawling. Now every environmentalist will be saying that's excellent. There need to be firm controls on trawling, which destroys the seabed, and the fishing industry will go absolutely mad by those words. So I just wondered, how ambitious do you intend to be when it comes to looking at the issue of trawling and the damage to seabed?
Well, I think it's a concern that we have for quite a long time. It's not totally new. I mean, you know very well that fisheries is the main driver of biodiversity loss at sea. So this is all the challenge of the common fisheries policy to try to limit that. And we have a number of measures that have been put in place and developed over the years to manage the gears, the fishing mess, the seasonal closures, the closed areas, and so on, to try to limit as much as possible the impact of fish on ecosystems and habitats in general. So this is a long-standing effort. Remember all the discussion that took place years ago about the deep sea trawling and so on. So this is not new. This is there. There are efforts. What is interesting is that now there will be a report published by summer on the implementation of the technical measures regulation, and based on this report, the Commission in autumn will propose will adopt an action plan with dedicated actions on how to conserve marine resources and protection of marine areas. So this is an opportunity. I mean, now that we have to look at the implementation of the regulation to see what works, what's not working, how we could do more. And clearly, this is important considering the ambition we have to increase the percentage of marine protected areas in Europe, and especially the restricted areas where there will be no activity taking place. I mean, we have a target of 10%. So we need to look at that and propose actions to try to limit the impact of fishing. Of course, this has to be done also with member states, because we know that most of the most endangered ecosystems are coastal systems along the coast, where the member states have also a role to play, because they are ones that are managing measures in those very coastal areas. So this is, I mean, a good moment to discuss all this. And I think, I mean, you mentioned bottom trawling. I think the issue of biodiversity is not the only one that's, I mean, bigger questions about this type of fishing method, huh? Because, I mean, we have all the impact of the decarbonization aspect. There is a revision of the taxation of fuel in Europe. This will also impact the economic model of this type of sector in Europe. Then you have all the problem of cohabitation with other activities, including the wind farms and so on. So there is a number of factors that anyway, and I know that the fishermen, I mean, they are very clever people. They know what's happening and on different angles. And I think, I mean, they have always adapted their fishing technique and methods to the environment. So
okay. I'm going to bring you to the end, but I look forward to the specific proposals. And on that score, okay, this is a communication. It now has to be translated into a whole series of initiatives, most of them legislation. what's going to come first? What's going to come next out of the pipeline from the Commission? What legislation do we expect to see proposed before the end of the year, for example, Isabel?
Well, there are plenty. We mentioned just before the ETS proposal that will come this summer. I mean, as for example, DG Mare is concerned. I mean, we just published the aquaculture guidelines. There is a new initiative that will come next year on algae. That is a very promising sector.
Algae for aquaculture, so we can try and find a way of stopping fish farms eating fish.
Yeah, that's one of the issue at stake. I mean, the feed for aquaculture fish, indeed. But so that's clearly in the pipeline. There is also a revision of the marketing standards for seafood products, will be very important. I mean, it will complete the number of measures that will be adopted under the Farm to Fork that concern all type of sectors in food production. But there will be a revision of the seafood standard. The idea behind is to agree on a number of criteria to inform better, I mean, both the consumers and the supply chain actors about the sustainability of the products. So these are one among many other initiatives that are in preparation. I mean, there is also, for example, the colleagues from DGM, they are working also in a revision of the ship recycling regulation. That will be also a major element. I mean, we have this regulation in place in Europe. I mean, there is a question about how to make it more efficient or to broaden its scope, including to cover, for example, the decommissioning of oil platforms. That is a very important element for circular economy. So there are plenty of initiatives that will come in coming months and years.
Well, that's going to keep us all busy. Thank you very much indeed. Right, well, we've come to the end of our hour, so let me just thank Isabel Reboost, the Secretary General of the European Seaports Association, Bernard Van Hull, Director of Public Affairs with the Costa Group, cruise liners, and Isabel Violon from the European Commission. Thank you all very much. And for those of you who, post-COVID are able to get to the sea, I hope you enjoy your dip in sustainable, warm blue waters. All the best. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.